Well, everybody, I hope you are having a wonderful week thus far. We are quickly approaching the weekend. I believe today is Thursday. For folks in Ohio and Southern Ohio in particular, you survived Snowmageddon this week, and now we've got the frigid cold temperatures heading our way. So, good things to look forward to. But also some good things to look forward to is the beginning of my investigation into the Circleville DuPont. DuPont has been in the headlines over the last few years because of mainly one thing: PFAS, forever chemicals, byproducts of their products, things that don't go away, that don't break down in the environment, can be absorbed into the human body, stored in your cells, and then for some, 10, 15, 20, 30 years later, these chemicals begin causing problems in the body. And we start seeing things like cancer and other serious illnesses develop linked to these forever chemicals. Now, one of the easiest ways to spot something that has forever chemicals is any pot and pan that has Teflon, especially if it was a product of DuPont. But Teflon is extremely hazardous, and it's found in pretty much every home in the United States of America. But it's dangerous. It's a forever chemical that's in that Teflon. So DuPont, according to their own documentation, according to the EPA, U.S. EPA, not Ohio EPA, the U.S. EPA reports, call the Circleville DuPont a PFAS manufacturer. It's a PFAS producing facility, documented in reports by the EPA. As we're learning more and more about these forever chemicals and how dangerous they are. And DuPont is the granddaddy of them all. So over the next few weeks, few months, we're going to be digging into the toxic legacy and ongoing contamination risk from the Circleville DuPont facility right along US 23 in Pickaway County, just south of Columbus. But this site is very large. It is a massive complex. If you look down on the graphic, so to speak, you will see, if I can get my finger here, right there, you will see an aerial view, a satellite view of the DuPont plant in Circleville. Now, a lot of folks probably going to be in my comments mad because I'm going after a major employer. But I'm not going after them to see the place shut down. It's just to make sure that what they do is done safely. And at the end of the day, for one, it's not making the workers sick. And for two, it's not destroying the environment. Because these chemicals, their products, the stuff they use at this facility, are extremely, and I will put emphasis on the extremely dangerous, hazardous chemicals. But they all haven't stayed put. I posted not too long ago some EPA documents, some records about PFAS being found in the Scioto River. And they are found in very high levels, above what is perceived to be safe by nearly 600 times in the Scioto River in Ross County. Now, it begs to question, where did it come from? Well, there's a good possibility and a high likelihood that the PFAS we're finding in the Scioto River came from DuPont, which sits in the floodplain of the Scioto River. You might not be able to tell from the image, But if you look at the very right hand corner of the screen, you will see a little piece of the Scioto River in the corner of the graphic there. That's how close DuPont is to the Scioto River. And over the years, it has been well documented that they have released some nasty stuff at the DuPont facility in Circleville. In fact, I was able to pull a judicial order up that lists a lot of the chemicals that were released specifically during the 1980s, from 81 up till I believe 88 is the last record. It don't have anything prior to that, and I'm not talking about anything in the 90s, 2000s on. We're just going to read off some of the chemicals and the amount that was released at DuPont. Now, the first one ended up being 16,000 gallons of extremely dangerous VDC, which is very similar to vinyl chloride. It's actually, I'm going to try to pronounce it, vinyl iodine chloride. And this was because of an underground leak that was detected in May of 1981. But 16,000 gallons of this dangerous chlorinated solvent was released over a period of several months. It wasn't something that just happened one day and they said, oh my God, we got to fix this. No, it went on for months, undetected in the soil and groundwater. For several years, some of the recovery wells on the property of DuPont, specifically between 1981 and 1987, had VDC concentrations of over 8,000 parts per billion. That is a lot. And this stuff was, basically what happened was there was an underground VDC supply line at the production plant, and it was adjacent to a concrete pad, and that's where the line entered into the plant. It leaked for months, and they estimated that 16,000 gallons poured into the soil and into the groundwater, which of course we also have to understand that it would have made it to the Scioto River, because it would have flowed, the groundwater would have flowed the course of the river because of the underground aquifer. But that wasn't the only one. There's a list in the 1980s of various spills. August 25th, 1983, you had 100 gallons of methanol released during the filling of a tanker car. It overfilled, poured onto the ground. Says location was ground surface adjacent to a railroad spur at the site. Also, from January 13th to the 14th in 1985, 18,000 pounds plus 2,800 gallons of acetone was spilled at the DuPont plant. Says location was ground surface at the polymer production plant. 1,000 gallons were recovered. 1,650 gallons evaporated. 150 gallons infiltrated soil were entered a retention pond. Ended up being 78 tons of contaminated soil was removed down to a depth between 5 to 7 feet. But it didn't clean it up. Acetone has remained at very high levels, anywhere from 100 to 200 parts per million in the soil. But that's still not all. The list literally goes on. And the reason why I'm reading this list is because I'm giving you a 10-year decade period where there is documented toxic releases from the DuPont facility, which sits along the banks of the Scioto River, which is just a half hour south of Columbus, half hour north of Chillicothe. What happens here does impact outside the Pickaway County area. But let's get back to our list of toxic releases from DuPont in Circleville. Looking at the report here, mid 1980s, around 1986, we have VDC contaminated groundwater in recovery wells DB2 and DB3, 200 gallons per minute and 600 gallons per minute, respectively. VDC was found within those recovery wells. That's that vinyl chloride substance we first talked about. There's also lagoons that were used without permits. I'm looking at 2 1.5 acre aeration lagoons and a sludge drying bed were used without permits during the 1980s and prior. Serious contaminants were poured into these lagoons and these pits. It further says that hazardous constituents were treated, water bypassed lagoons to storm sewer and then to the Scioto River. Also, in 1986, May 13th, 164 gallons of fuel oil was spilled near an aeration lagoon. And then, February 7th, 1988, we had pyridine in an acetone mixture. 570 gallons of pyridine and acetone was released into drainage ditches near, says, the SP resin tank farm. They said 270 tons of contaminated soil was removed and shipped to a hazardous waste facility. Remaining soil still contained 9,650 parts per million of pyridine and 6,902 parts per million of acetone, all in the groundwater at high levels that's been found pretty consistently throughout the 80s after this release. So those are just some of the toxic releases that has occurred at the DuPont facility in Circleville, Ohio. But like I said, we're just taking a short snapshot of a 10-year period during the 1980s, because this information is found in a judicial order that came out telling DuPont, you're going to be held liable for all this nasty stuff, this toxicity. They were. But even more so, decades down the road, when the Forever Chemicals lawsuit came out and DuPont is held liable, having to pay out billions and billions of dollars to communities across the country. And there's several water companies, municipalities, cities that have joined in on this PFAS lawsuit. Pike County Water down in Pike County, they are seeking money from the PFAS lawsuit. They want to be a part of the settlement. According to them, PFAS has cost them large amounts of money because they've had to upgrade their equipment in the water treatment process. There's been PFAS found in their facilities. So they signed on to the lawsuit. Now, the city of Chillicothe really needs to do the same thing. And they have voted to begin the process of working with a group of attorneys to see if they can join the lawsuit, which I know they can, because here's some other information. I've made it very clear that, 6,500 tons of hazardous waste from DuPont was dumped into the Chillicothe landfill. Now, the information is very here and there about the dumping. It's not exactly known exactly what point at the Old City dump DuPont was releasing this stuff. It was done between 1974 and 1979, where they dumped 6,500 tons of hazardous waste. Now, the city dump wasn't just one parcel. There's actually other dump sites. And if you bear with me for a moment, I'm going to pull up an image on the screen of other dump sites related to the Chillicothe landfill. Some of them, I wonder if they've ever been looked at, cleaned up. Is this stuff still there? We're going to pull it up on the screen real quick. For my listeners on the podcast, I'll do my best to explain what I'm showing here. But this diagram comes from the Ohio EPA. What you will see is various parts of the existing Chillicothe landfill. You see it, this big corner towards the bottom of the screen. Above it, you see the Camp Sherman, not the ancient Camp Sherman base in Chillicothe from World War I. This is the Camp Sherman training facility for the Ohio National Guard. You'll see it just on the other side of the big Chillicothe landfill. And then just behind the shooting range, the target range, you have these large, as a kid, we just called them ponds. Looking back now and seeing records, they were pits. See, the city dump was a gravel pit, a gravel mine, prior to it ever becoming a city dump. But it is believed those pits back there that I called a pond as a kid when we would sneak back onto that property, they're almost 100 feet deep. And according to EPA records, when the city got control of the property and they began using it as a landfill, they started shoving stuff and just dumping it into these pits that were estimated to be upwards of 100 feet. That's putting you down towards bedrock. That's well into the groundwater table. That's well into the aquifer in this area. And the city was just dumping it. And then they allowed DuPont to come in and dump hazardous waste as well. And I can't prove it. I don't have the documentations, but I say there is a very high likelihood that these pits is where DuPont dumped their hazardous waste. But looking at the diagram, you will also see kind of in the center, US 23. And then you'll also see where Narrows Road is. And you see where it kind of curves and goes into a more due north direction. Well, just off to the bottom left-hand side of this picture, you see an area marked as a previous landfill area. Now, this particular area is right next to US 23. I'm sure that it had to be dug up a little bit when they was building and expanding the highway. But this is another dump. It's the original. This is where they first started dumping stuff when Chillicothe needed a landfill, started putting it here, and that's where it was. But there's no record of anybody ever doing any investigation to see if that hazardous stuff's still there or what it may be. Because the interesting thing is about the Chillicothe City dump, not all the waste, not all the nasty stuff that's inside there, not everything is known of where it came from. They've estimated that at the old Chillicothe landfill on Narrows Road, between Narrows and Seney Road, near Marietta, there has been, I lost my train of thought. There's been this belief that the DuPont chemicals may have been put into those gravel pits 100 feet deep. There's other previous landfills on that property just south of US 23. And like I said, the waste, 6% has been identified as industrial waste that was coming to this facility. From where? The only one we know for sure is DuPont. I would imagine that the paper plant probably sent stuff here, but we also don't know if the atomic plant could have been, because it's also in records in the report when they was studying the old Chillicothe dump, see how toxic it was. It was discovered that it was discovered that 13% of all the waste that was taken into this place, they don't know where it came from. Flat out. They don't know where this stuff came from. So it was put into the dump. No record of where it came from, who it was from, which begs the question, could stuff from Piketon have made it to the Chillicothe dump? That's something that we are actively looking into. And if the city of Chillicothe would give me access to the dump, to that property, I would be happy to take samples and send them to Dr. Ketterer and have them analyzed for any radioactive isotopes. Dr. Ketterer has found radiation in the plants around the Portsmouth gaseous diffusion plant. He's found it in the water. He's found it in the soil. He's found it in trees. He's found it everywhere. So there's always been this belief that there was off-site dumping from the atomic plant in Piketon, but it's never been proven. I've got a couple theories. I know one place that they was dumping stuff illegally, but that will be for another episode, or possibly a webinar, because it's really deep. But there's always been this idea that these landfills, these shady landfills throughout southern Ohio, would have been great places to dump unwanted stuff from the atomic plant, or really any industry. Jackson County landfill was a very nasty site. Goodyear had a plant over that way. At the same time, they had the atomic plant, because the Piketon atomic plant was originally known as the Goodyear atomic plant. Goodyear owned them. But it is documented that Goodyear dumped 5,700 barrels of hazardous waste into the Jackson County landfill. Now, supposedly it never came from Piketon. It came from their other Goodyear facilities. But you really don't know. Because at the same time, all these dump sites have been tested for chemicals, VOCs, heavy metals. They're never tested for radiation. Ever. So there's no definitive yay or nay whether there could have been radioactive stuff placed not only in the Jackson County landfill, but in the Chillicothe landfill. So if the city of Chillicothe would give me access to that property, let me spend a day up there and get samples and ship them out, we could have an idea of if any radioactive substances was ever placed in the Chillicothe city dump. But I digress. Let's get back to DuPont, because that's why we're here and that's what we're talking about, is the granddaddy of them all, DuPont in Circleville, and the toxic legacy they have left behind, and is still being played out today because, of course, it's still a major employer in southern Ohio, and it's an enormous facility that's still making dangerous substances. Now, like I said in the beginning, I'm not going after DuPont to have them shut it down, because Lord knows we need jobs in this area. But we've got to hold them accountable for the damage that's been done, contamination, and we also have to make sure that they have standards set to prevent future incidents. We don't need another 10-year period like the 1980s again in Circleville in the 2020s. And on into the 2030s. We don't need that. We want jobs, but we want safe jobs. We want to encourage new businesses to come into the area, but we also have to set clear boundaries, red line in the sand. We are serious about protecting our environment. We're serious about protecting the workers, and we're serious about protecting the community. And if places like DuPont want to continue to do business, then they have to make sure that those things are a priority, not just lining their pockets with money. These companies have to start looking at people as people and not just human capital, just another line item on a spreadsheet. And I've said that, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. I'm sick of these companies exploiting small towns and exploiting hard-working men and women who are just trying to earn a living and have just a piece of the American dream. So over the next few weeks, you're going to hear a lot about DuPont. I'm going to be digging into a lot of that and sharing some of the information that I know currently about the facility. And like I said, we don't want to see it shut down. We just want to see it clean. We just want to see clean products. We just want to see clean working environments for the employees. We want to see this stuff stay out of the Scioto River. Is that too much to ask? We'll see. But at the same time, we're also going to be digging into the PFAS and finding locations throughout the region where either PFAS were manufactured or released, or where there has already been existing testing done and these forever chemicals have shown up. This is serious stuff, folks. Not everything I do is glamorous and fun and exciting. This is serious stuff because we're dealing with companies and corporations who have unlimited resources, who don't make people a priority. So we're going to be digging deeper into DuPont, but I wanted to give this introduction as to why we have to look at DuPont and Circleville in relation to forever chemicals and contamination that flows south from Pickaway County on down the line into places like Ross County and Chillicothe. Because we all of these communities, all of these counties, all the municipalities, we're all getting our water from the same aquifer. And if we're not taking care of it, we're just drinking cancer. We got to do something about that. Well, I appreciate you tuning in once again. I know I always say I'm going to be short and brief to the point, and I try to be, but there's always so much information that we've got to pack in such a short period of time. But I appreciate everyone who listens, tunes in, shares, comments. I thank you all so much. Together, we are making a difference. The more you share my work, it's not about building me up or bragging about me, but the more you share the work I've done, the more we can get this information out to the people, the more we can gather a consensus, gather more like-minded people to say, you know what? Enough's enough. We want safe and healthy communities. And with that, I am going to bow out of this episode of the Fallout Files. I am your host, investigative journalist Jason Sally, the founder of the Ohio Atomic Press and the host of the Fallout Files. Make sure you take care of yourself, and most importantly, also take care of the environment. Because, like I've said it 100 times, after episode, when it's gone, it's gone. It won't ever come back. So we have to take pride in protecting our natural resources, our environment, and our community.